Ivan Milat was a serial killer who terrorized New South Wales, Australia in the 1990s. So much so that the 2005 horror film Wolf Creek was inspired by his horrific crimes. Commonly known as the backpacker murderer, Milat captured, assaulted, robbed and murdered 2 men and 5 women between 1989 and 1992. His modus operandi was to approach the hitchhikers along the Hume Highway, enticing them by offering to provide transport to the southern parts of New South Wales. Little did the hitchhikers know that this journey would lead them to their final destination, the Belanglo State Forest. Join us today as we dive into the sickening crimes committed by Ivan Milat, the backpacker hunter from Down Under. On the 27th of December, 1944, Ivan Milat was born to Croatian labourer Stephen Milat and his Australian wife, Margaret Piddleston. He was the 5th of 14 children, and the growing family first lived in the Bosley Park suburb of Sydney before relocating to Liverpool. Many of the 10 Milat boys were known to the local police, and Ivan displayed antisocial behaviour from a young age. From his late teenage years into early adulthood, Milat committed several crimes. At age 17, he was sent to a juvenile detention centre for theft. At age 19, he was involved in a shop breaking. At age 20, he was sentenced to 18 months for a break and enter. Within a month of being released, he was arrested for driving a stolen car and sentenced to 2 years hard labour. At age 22, he was sentenced to 3 years for theft. In April 1971, Milat was charged with the abduction of 2 18-year-old hitchhikers, one of whom he SA'd. While awaiting trial, he was involved in several robberies with some of his brothers before faking his suicide and fleeing to New Zealand for a year. Although he was arrested in 1974, the robbery and kidnap cases against him failed at trial due to the Milat family lawyer, Jim Marsden. Milat then took a job as a truck driver in 1975 and worked on and off for the Roads and Traffic Authority for the next 20 years. Up until the mid-1990s, hitchhiking in Australia was considered a relatively safe means of travel. However, unsolved missing person cases, including those of Trudy Adams, Tony Jones, Naoko Onda, and Anna Rosa Lever, led those who still hitchhiked to travel in pairs for safety. By the time the bodies were first discovered at the Belanglo State Forest, several other backpackers had also disappeared. This included Victorian couple Deborah Everest and James Gibson, both aged 19, that had been missing since leaving Sydney for Confest on the 30th December 1989. 21-year-old German backpacker Simone Schmidl had been missing since leaving Sydney for Melbourne on the 20th of January 1991. German couple Gabor Neugebauer, 21, and Anja Habschied, 20, had disappeared after leaving a King's Cross hotel from Mildura on the 26th of December 1991. British backpackers Caroline Clark, 21, and Joanne Walters, 22, who were last seen in King's Cross on the 18th of April 1992. On the 19th of September 1992, 2 runners discovered a hidden corpse while orienteering in Belanglo. The morning after, police discovered a second body 30 metres from the first. Police quickly confirmed via dental records that the bodies were of Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters. Walters had been stabbed a total of 15 times, 4 times in the chest, once in the neck, and 9 times in the back, which would have paralysed her. Clark had been shot 10 times in the head at the burial site, and police believed that she had been used as target practice. After a thorough search of the forest, investigators ruled out the possibility of further discoveries within the Belanglo State Forest. In October 1993, a local man looking for firewood discovered bones in a remote section of the forest. He returned with police to the scene where the 2 bodies were quickly discovered and later identified to be Deborah Everest and James Gibson. Gibson's skeleton, which was found in a fetal position, suggested 8 stab wounds. A large knife had cut through his upper spine, which would have caused paralysis, and stab wounds to the back and chest would have punctured his heart and lungs. Everest had been savagely beaten. Her skull was fractured in 2 places. her jaw broken, and there were knife marks on her forehead. She had been stabbed once in the back. Investigators were puzzled by the discovery of Gibson's body in the Belanglo, as they had previously discovered his camera on the 31st of December 1989 and his backpack on the 13th of March 1990, by the side of the road at the Galston Gorge, over 120 kilometers to the north. On the 1st of November 1993, a skeleton was found in a clearing along a fire trail in the forest during a police sweep. The skeleton was later identified as that of Simone Schmidl and showed at least 8 stab wounds. 2 had severed her spine and the others would have punctured her heart and lungs. Clothing found at the scene was not Schmidl's but matched that of another missing backpacker, Anja Habschied. The bodies of Habschied and Neugebauer were also found on a nearby trail on the 4th of November 1993 in shallow graves 50 meters apart. Habschied had been decapitated and despite an extensive search, her skull was never found. Neugebauer had been shot in the head 6 times. Evidence suggested that some of the victims did not die instantly from their injuries. In response to the bodies found on the 14th of October 1993, Task Force Air containing more than 20 detectives and analysts was set up by the New South Wales Police. On the 5th of November 1993, the New South Wales government increased the reward in relation to the Belanglo State killings to $500,000. Public warnings were also given, aimed at international backpackers to prevent them from hitchhiking along the Hume Highway. After developing the profile of the killer, the police received an enormous volume of data from numerous sources. Investigators applied link analysis technology to roads and traffic authority vehicle records, gym memberships, gun licensing, and internal police records. This allowed the results to be narrowed down to a list of 230 and later 32 suspects. There were similarities between all 7 murders. Each body had been dumped in a remote bushland and covered by a pyramid of sticks and ferns. Forensic study determined that each had suffered multiple stab wounds to the torso and many showed signs of assault. The killer, probably a local with a 4-wheel drive, had evidently restrained and spent considerable time with the victims both during and after the murders, since campsites were discovered close to the location of each body. Matching .22 bullets, shell casings, and cartridge boxes from the 2 weapons were also common between the crime scenes. It was speculated that the crimes were committed by several killers, considering most of the victims were attacked while as pairs and had been killed in different ways and buried separately. On November 13, 1993, police received a call from Paul Onions, 24, in the UK. On the 25th of January 1990, Onions had been backpacking in Australia and while hitchhiking from Liverpool Station towards Mildura, had accepted a ride south of Casula from a man known as Bill. South of the town of Mittagong and less than a kilometre away from Belanglo State Forest, Bill stopped and pulled out a revolver and some ropes, saying that it was a robbery. At that stage, Onions managed to flee while Bill chased and shot him. Onions flagged down a passing driver, Joanne Berry, and together they sped off. Onions then described the assailant and his vehicle to the Bowral police. On the 13th of April 1994, detectives refound a note regarding Onions' call and sought the original report from the Bowral police, but it was missing. Luckily, a constable had recorded the details in her notebook. Onion's statement was corroborated by Berry, who had also contacted the investigation team and the girlfriend of a man who worked with Ivan Milat and thought that he should be questioned over the case. The Milat residence was placed under police observation on February 26, 1994. Milat had also recently sold his Nissan Patrol 4-wheel drive following the discovery of the bodies of Clark and Walters. After the connection between Onion's experience and the Belanglo murders was discovered, Onions flew to Australia to assist with the investigation. On the 5th of May 1994, Onions identified Milat as the man who had given him a lift and attempted to murder him. Milat was finally arrested at his residence on the 22nd of May 1994 on robbery and weapon charges related to the Onions attack. The search of Milat's family residence uncovered many weapons and items that belonged to his victims. Milat appeared in court on the 23rd of May, but he did not enter a plea. On the 31st of May, Milat was also charged with the 7 backpacker murders. Meanwhile, brothers Richard and Walter were tried in relation to weapons, drugs, and stolen items found in their properties. A committal hearing for Milat regarding the murders began on 24th of October and lasted until 12th of December. Based on the evidence, at the beginning of February 1995, Milat was remanded in custody until June that same year. The trial opened at the Supreme Court of New South Wales in Sydney on the 26th of March 1996. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Milat is reported to be confident that he would be found innocent. His defense argued that in spite of the evidence, there was no non-circumstantial proof that Milat was guilty, and attempted to shift the blame on other members of his family, particularly Richard. 145 witnesses took the stand, including members of the Milat family who endeavoured to provide alibis. On the 27th of July 1996, after 18 weeks of testimony, a jury found Milat guilty of the murders. He was given a life sentence on each count without the possibility of parole. He was also convicted of the attempted murder, false imprisonment, and robbery of onions, for which he received 6 years jail each. On the 13th of May 2019, Milat was taken to the Prince of Wales Hospital and was subsequently diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer. Following his treatment, he was transferred to Long Bay Correctional Centre to continue his custodial sentences. On the 27th of October 2019, Milat died from esophagus and stomach cancer at Long Bay Correctional Centre. He was 74 years old. In his final days, New South Wales Police said in a statement that their officers visited Milat 8 times, in prison and in hospital, in an attempt to elicit a confession out of him. However, Milat did not confess. Milat was one of Australia's most notorious and violent serial killers. Backpacking in Australia will never be the same due to the horrific murders committed by him. The families of the 7 victims may never truly recover from the grave losses they suffered, and the lives of 7 individuals were cut extremely short due to the horrific actions of a truly sick man. Thank you for watching our very first video. We hope to make many more in the future.